Hello, and welcome to this edition of Speaking of Alzheimer's. I'm Beth Hinckley-Mugin, your host. This show is brought to you through the Northern Berkshire Community Television Corporation. We're very pleased that they've allowed us to do this show. Particularly, it's important to people who either are living with Alzheimer's or a related dementia, or are caregivers or friends or family members of someone with Alzheimer's and dementia. So I'm really glad that you've tuned in. Thanks for joining us. I'm very pleased to introduce to you my guest for today. Her name is Megan LeMay. She is the regional manager for the Alzheimer's Association in Western Massachusetts. So Megan, thanks for being here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Very happy to have you. You have a big job. You have a big job. Anyone working, I think, in Alzheimer's and dementia-related programs, it's a big job. Can you tell us a little bit of what some of the highlights of what your job is?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really lucky, actually, to be able to do a job that I am so passionate about and I really love, and I'm really dedicated to our mission. And the mission of the Alzheimer's Association is actually to eliminate Alzheimer's disease through the advancement of research. So one of the things we do is just we're the largest nonprofit funder of research into Alzheimer's and related dementias. And then the other big part of the mission of the Alzheimer's Association is to provide care and support for those impacted by Alzheimer's and dementia. So really trying to provide those resources and support for families, for caregivers, for individuals living with a diagnosis or living with symptoms of dementia in the community.
When we were talking about today's show, we both talked about how people who are just now beginning to face a possible diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia have to start at the very beginning, which is why your training programs that you sponsor are so important, and they have to be offered every few months in different areas because people are starting from the very beginning of what is Alzheimer's and how do I communicate and how do I get the diagnosis, that sort of thing. So it's a big job. You have a big job. You are in the Berkshires quite often, as I recall. You have a number of training programs that you offer on a regular basis here, and any of us who work in the Alzheimer's Network certainly appreciate that. So,
yeah, it's great to be out here. And even though we know that, thousands of people here in Massachusetts are living with Alzheimer's disease or another dementia, sometimes people don't know that much about it or don't know that many details about it. They may have some idea or may have known of a relative who've lived with it, but they don't know a lot of the specifics until it really starts to directly impact their family or their spouse or their parents. And then people are often start off a bit lost because this disease can be so overwhelming and so terrifying when they first get a diagnosis or start to notice symptoms in yourself. If you're starting to notice that your own memory is starting to fail or just change from what it used to be. So we really encourage that people reach out, call us, talk to a support, and then also attend some of our free education programs in the community. So we try to do as many education programs as we can, and again, they try to be at public spaces, so often like at libraries, a lot of senior centers, so we try to go to as many senior centers in the Berkshires and in Western Mass as possible. And so you can always call us and just figure out when our next upcoming education programs might be. Ask for them at your local senior center or the library. Sometimes we have them at local assisted livings as well, because they provide a free space for us where we can also just reach more people that way.
That's great.
So some of our education programs, they're on a variety of topics. We offer some basic ones, so usually they're only about an hour, depending on the class, but we offer a class such as Know the 10 Warning Signs, which goes through the 10 early warning signs of Alzheimer's or dementia. We have another program called Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia, which goes over really just what is Alzheimer's disease, what does it look like, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia. And then we have more classes that go into the more specifics around caregiving. So communication strategies, as well as how to cope with different behaviors that come up with Alzheimer's disease as well.
Good. And I'm just pointing out to our guests that or to our audience rather, that we have phone numbers that are on the screen. So the 787 number is Springfield.
Yes.
And if there wasn't someone in the office, I think it goes through to
Yes.
Watertown, which is the state
Yes.
location for the Alzheimer's Association. That's great. So let's talk a minute about the 10 warning signs and the basics of Alzheimer's. Is there one that you suggest that people look for before the other, or does it kind of not matter if the one is going to be offered in your area, try that one?
Yeah, it doesn't matter too much because we go over some of the basics in both. I think the 10 warning signs are good because it just really goes over all those details, because people often think like, oh, I'm experiencing this symptom such as I can't remember my friend's name who I ran into in the grocery store. And people will wonder like, oh, could that be an early sign of Alzheimer's? So people have a lot of questions about that. So we answer those types of questions in that program. So that can be really helpful because we want people to attend those programs even if you don't have a direct connection to Alzheimer's or dementia. It's just really good general knowledge for the public to know, because at some point it could affect you, or it's just good to know, if you have a neighbor who's affected by this, and maybe you want to go to our basics program, our just understanding Alzheimer's program, so you can learn, how to be a better neighbor or just a better friend to someone who's going through this.
So you might pick up some techniques from the 10 warning signs that you can very gently share with some of the other people, their neighbors or family members.
Right.
That's great.
And right now we also have a program too that's sort of a customer service training actually for people who are in the non-healthcare professionals. So for example, people, bank tellers, people who work in the financial industry, or people who work in retail. And so we can go out and do those trainings for free for employees. So if anyone has a business where they want their employees trained, we're happy to do that for free and come out and do that at any time. And that's just, like I mentioned, a basic customer service training. So it just kind of tells people if they have a customer who comes in and now is seeming more confused, or a customer is having trouble just counting change, things like that. If the customer seems disoriented, just to have some awareness of dementia and be able to better interact with that customer and better take care of them and better connect with them. And sometimes it can also be, sometimes with dementia, unfortunately, people, lose some of their social graces, or maybe you just notice that someone's being more rude or just cuts in front of the line. And so sometimes we just have to stop and think maybe it's because this person is living with this neurodegenerative brain disease, and that can be applicable in a lot of different situations. But we wanna train even a larger percentage of the population for that reason, so that they can just have a little bit more compassion in those situations.
And to be sensitive to the fact that Alzheimer's does not have a cure at present. We're really promoting, I think, the people around the individual and the family dealing with Alzheimer's being much more understanding of what this disease is presenting to people. When you've gotten calls, like I know you cover a large area of Western Massachusetts, what kinds of companies have called you for the customer service training? Is it banks or restaurants maybe?
So I've done quite a few banks, trained their employees, which is excellent, because they tend to serve a population that is impacted by this. And I would love to train more restaurants. We haven't done as many restaurants as I would like to, but we're definitely open to that, because it just makes sense that someone a family who is supporting someone with dementia still wants to go out to dinner sometimes.
Absolutely.
And, do normal things.
Sure.
And sometimes just a simple accommodation or a simple adjustment can make all the difference. So, for example, some restaurants have even gone as far as changing their menu to make it a little bit more accommodating, or just making things more dementia friendly, but also age friendly. So sometimes that just means printing a menu that's in bigger font, or making it simplified a little bit so it's not as overwhelming and confusing for someone to look at a menu and choose something. So small changes like that can make a big difference for people.
And some individuals may not even be able to read the menu.
Right.
So the server is going to be really important to offer the suggestions, the 12 ways of having potatoes, in a little bit slower, less confusing manner.
Exactly. Right. And sometimes, it's just about slowing down what we're saying, making the choices simpler, being patient if someone needs an extra minute, or to clarify something for someone.
It's so interesting that you mentioned this. Just last week, a friend of mine was telling a story about being out to dinner with her family, and the server came over and didn't even speak to her. Sort of said, well, what will she have? Without even giving her an opportunity to say, she has a choice in what she wants. She was able to, to give the answer, but she was very offended by the fact that someone just didn't even give her a chance to try to order her own food, and just kind of ignored her. And those are the things that I just saw you cringe, and I'm cringing too.
Yeah, and
thinking
that can
about
be
those
so
things.
dehumanizing, and sometimes it's just as simple as making eye contact with someone, not dismissing someone, and that can make all the difference. And like I said, giving someone an extra minute to just think about their response. And often, especially in like the customer service world, people are so quick, they don't want to
get the order in,
minute.
and you're going to want your food fast. But I put myself through college as a waitress, so I know that there's lots of choices and so forth, and then just slowing it down. I mean, I think it would be something everyone could do a little bit better, to really give good customer service to someone that either has a hearing problem, or may have a dementia, or any number of things that's happening with someone. That's really sensitivity training.
Right,
So,
definitely.
when you were talking about kind of slowing down and giving giving fewer options and so forth, that reminds me of the basics of communication, or what is your communication program?
Effective communication strategies. Yes.
To me, that is such an important training program to provide. Can you give us a little idea of some of the things that you cover in that, and why that's so important?
Yeah, so one of the things, we try to give different examples and go through communication, especially as it changes throughout the process of the disease. So we know that many people are still living in the community who are just in the early stages of Alzheimer's or dementia. So they still are very capable of doing a lot of things. These are the people you're going to often see out to dinner in public situations, but they're still living with some mild memory loss. So how can we just make some accommodations to make things a little bit easier for them? So one example is, instead of asking, and this is even true as they progress in the disease, but that instead of asking open-ended questions, we might ask a yes or no question in some situations, or offer a suggestion in the question. So instead of asking an open-ended question like, what would you like for breakfast, where someone with dementia might struggle to come up with an answer out of the blue, that you could ask, do you want the eggs or cereal? So therefore,
that's a great idea.
You're still offering them a choice, but kind of giving them an answer also.
And giving them control over what they actually want to have for breakfast.
Right.
That's really good.
We just try to give some techniques like that, and then talk about how communication changes as the disease progresses as well. Because unfortunately it is, of course, a progressive disease, and someone will start to lose their language abilities, and people start to talk less. and they'll have trouble comprehending what we're saying too. So it could just be about slowing down what we're saying, and then also, just as that progresses, using other ways to communicate as well. So just talking about the importance of just physical contact, like still holding someone's hand, giving someone a hug can make a big difference, in providing just other ways for people to still communicate and have contact with their loved ones.
Even saying things that don't even require a response, like, oh, isn't this a beautiful room?
Yes,
You know, and
exactly.
you look so nice today. You know, things that don't really require, you know, a response, but it's just still communication, and maybe the person you're speaking with will have something to say, maybe they won't.
Right.
And if it's not exactly in response to "you look nice today," just go with the flow.
Right, exactly.
Follow up with something that makes really, you know, that makes sense and makes the person feel comfortable, I think.
Right, and that's why we do encourage that people still keep talking, even though sometimes we might notice that someone is starting to struggle with a regular conversation, that they aren't as talkative as they once were, or they just can't participate like they once could. But it's still important for you to keep talking, even if you feel kind of awkward about it, but that if you keep talking, it still actually can be very comforting to the person, soothing to the person, if they just to hear your voice. Or sometimes if you want to read to someone, that can be good, and they might not comprehend everything, the whole story that you're reading to them, but it can still be meaningful for them to just participate in something
That's
like
such
that.
a good idea.
To like
That's such
listen,
a good idea.
And just to hear your voice.
One of my pet peeves is, and I've said this before, and here it is again, please don't quiz your loved one. Well, who am I? What's my name? I'm your daughter. Don't you know my, you know, don't sit there with a pile of pictures and, you know, see if it you know, kind of it doesn't matter. This is a picture of a really beautiful family. This is our family, you know, as opposed to, well, who's this and who's that? Oh, you remember him. And, you know, it can get very overwhelming for our friends with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good reminder that, families are often tempted to do that quizzing, but we really want to stay away from that as much as possible.
That's right.
Because it just makes the person more upset, or can frustrate them and can actually escalate a situation when we just want the person to feel as at peace as possible, calm, happy.
And successful.
Yes, and there's just no reason to quiz someone. And this is why we always say never argue either, or say what's right or wrong, because we see this a lot with families that, you know, it's very frustrating when you're a caregiver, when you know what they're saying is incorrect. If someone is saying, you know, today is Tuesday, when you know it's Friday, but instead of always correcting or criticizing.
And it doesn't matter,
It doesn't matter. We just go with the flow. It doesn't matter what day it is, really. If they want to think that it's Tuesday, then, you know, you can go with that.
That's
and
a really
go with
good
the
point.
flow.
I just want to remind you, my guest today is Megan LeMay. She is the regional manager for the Alzheimer's Association, and she covers Western Massachusetts, which is a huge area. And she is in the Berkshires with us on many, many occasions. So we certainly appreciate that she is taking time to be on our show. So let's see. What other, are there some, do you want to talk a little bit about when people have questions about drug trials? Is that something you want to talk about a little bit about?
Sure. So, I just want to remind everyone that they can reach out to us at the Alzheimer's Association if they have any questions about what's going on with the research, because often we hear in the news about random studies that have happened saying, you know, oh, this will reduce your risk of Alzheimer's, or this is going to be the cure for Alzheimer's. So if you just have questions about that and want to talk through that, you can always call our 24/7 helpline and talk to an expert in research around what's going on, the latest clinical trials, latest studies. And the good news is that we are doing more clinical trials than ever have been done before. So this is an exciting time in research, and that lots of good things are happening and progress is being made. So you can always learn about that and learn about if you want to participate in a study. So we're always in need of more people to participate in clinical trials and studies, and not just drug trials, but also research like around caregiving, around all kinds of things. The impact of nutrition or certain vitamins on your health. So there's opportunities to participate in studies on all different things.
And we're talking about in Massachusetts.
Yes.
What is most local to us in Western Mass or the Berkshires?
Here I would say probably in southern Vermont at the Bennington Memory Clinic, I believe it is. That they do research up there and clinical trials up there. People, of course, go to New York, Connecticut as well, but closest to here would probably be Vermont. And
any of the Boston medical centers doing some research?
And Boston does a ton of research. So yes, and they'll pay for transportation and give people stipends or financial benefits to Boston as well.
Because it's quite a long, what's it, 2.5 hours from the Berkshires to get to Boston for probably a full day of education and training. Well, that's good to know. And again, the 800 number that's on our screen is the number to call, and if you have specific questions about drug trials.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Yes, and so even though we still haven't gotten to a point where we have any effective prevention, treatment, or cure, we have learned a lot more about the disease, and researchers keep assuring us that we are close to some kind of hopefully either breakthrough or some kind of meaningful something that will make a meaningful difference in people's lives as far as the research or the drugs that they're working on as far as prevention and treatment.
Good. This time goes so quickly. We have about 7 minutes left to talk, so let's make sure we talk about the things that are most important. Is there anything in particular that you want to bring up that we haven't covered yet?
Well, a few things. I guess I can just talk about, again, I think you've mentioned many times the importance of support groups in the area too, that there are many caregiver support groups, and we're also trying to start more support groups for those actually living with memory loss as well. So one program we have is called All's Meetups, which is just a meetup program where you can meet others who are also living in the early stages of memory loss or in the early stages of Alzheimer's or dementia, and their caregivers. And that's supposed to be a more fun social meetup,
That's
and
great.
Not a traditional support group, but in a more fun setting, like at a museum or a theater or a coffee shop, to just meet up with others who are coping with that. And then again, our education programs, and I wanted to mention too, so our behaviors program, for example,
the education program that you offer, yes.
That people can come to, and that just goes into a lot of the details about coping with different behaviors that come up as someone progresses with this disease. And it can be so challenging, and so that's why we just want to provide people with as much information and help and strategies as possible to cope with those different things that come up. So, for example, one thing we use, and I don't know if you've talked about this, is the therapeutic fiblet.
Oh, heavens, yes. Fiblet's an important word in my vocabulary, and anyone who knows me.
Yes. So, the therapeutic fiblet, just being that sometimes it's actually the more and better and more therapeutic thing to do is to use a fiblet instead of telling someone with dementia that they're wrong, or again, not correcting, but then using it in other situations too. So for example, if you know that your family member just really shouldn't be driving anymore, can we use a fiblet to just try to change the conversation about why they need to stop driving? So for an example, a fiblet would be like, telling them that their grandkid really needs to borrow the car every day, or something like that. And so that can be used in, fiblets can be used in such a variety of settings and different ways.
That's a great idea. One of the big ones that I have experienced in my work is when someone thinks that their mother needs them to come home and make supper. And, you know, the person I'm talking to is 85 years old, and obviously their mother is no longer around. And the fiblet would be, you know, oh, your mom called and she's got supper all ready and she wants you to stay here and be with us,
Yes.
or something along those lines. A little trickier for people at home, that like a son or a daughter taking care of someone, but that's another example of a fiblet.
Right.
When you were talking about the Alzheimer's meetups, there's also the Memory Cafe,
Yes.
which we do have here in the Berkshires,
Yes.
that meets at the Colonial Theater in Pittsfield on the second Tuesday of the month during the daytime. So if you can either look in your local calendars or maybe check in with the Colonial, you can find out about the Memory Cafe, which it sounds like it's a really fun program.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, the memory cafes are excellent and just provide another way for people to get out and meet others who are coping with the same thing, and to do something fun together, but in a setting that's just more understanding and I think empathetic to people's differing needs around the disease. And
do you attend those? Have you had a chance
I've been to some.
Wonderful.
I haven't been to the one in Pittsfield, but I should really check it out and connect with some people there. But I've been to some in other parts of Western Mass, and yeah, they're excellent. And some of them have gained huge popularity as just a fun space to go for people. So it's great.
And free stuff. That's important too. And we don't have too much time left, but the Clark Art Institute also has seasonal programs where there's a specific day where people with dementia and their caregivers can go and view the art or have a special program. So Clark Art in Williamstown is another really good place to be in contact with.
Definitely.
We would be remiss if we didn't also mention the Berkshire Alzheimer's Partnership.
Yes.
So there is actually a local partnership that both Megan and myself are involved in that operates here in the Berkshires and has for many years. I kind of forget how many years, but many, like 15 or 20 years.
Yes.
And there's partnerships in different parts of the state, but you and I have had the privilege of attending some of the local partnership meetings and some of the activities that they do.
Yeah, and the Berkshire Partnership is so active, and so if anyone's looking for a volunteer opportunity, it's a great way to volunteer. That's not a huge commitment, but I mean, it can be a huge commitment if you want it to be, but a great way to get involved and connect with what's going on here. And we have a lot of different volunteer opportunities at the Alzheimer's Association, so you can always reach out to us with questions about that as well.
Like doing some of the training, for example.
Yeah, so for example,
I'm going to talk to you about that later, actually.
We're always looking for people who, if you're looking for a higher level type of volunteer work, so for example, maybe a retired teacher, you don't even necessarily have to have that formal training, but anyone who wants that higher level of volunteer experience, we can train you to teach our education programs or run our support groups like you've been doing for many years. And so there's always a need for that, but then also smaller volunteer roles as well.
Good. My guest today has been Megan LeMay, the regional manager for the Alzheimer's Association out of Western Massachusetts, and she covers a lot of territory, but I'm so pleased that you could take the time to be with us on Speaking of Alzheimer's today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you. You know, we hear from you from time to time that you watch our show and that you really believe that we bring some informative information, and I hope I'm sure today's show has been one of those opportunities. So please stay with us and join us another time. I appreciate it. And perhaps we'll have you back. There's a lot to talk about.
Yes, thank you.
So good. Thanks so much for being with us for Speaking of Alzheimer's.